Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. If you've not subscribed to our channel yet, please take a moment to do that right now. Thank you. So here on Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, over the last few years, I've been slowly reading through the collection, The Stories of Ray Bradbury. There's 100 stories in all, and we are up to story number 93 of 100, so we are nearly done with this project. Today's story comes from 1976, and it's called The Better Part of Wisdom. The way these reviews work is that I give a brief synopsis of the action and plot of the story and then wrap up with my thoughts and feelings. What it all means, is it still relevant today? Is it a good Bradbury tale? As for the synopsis, two men, Tom and Frank, are lounging lazily in a room full of art and furniture, mainly of their own design, when on a raining, pouring night near Dublin, someone knocks on the door, and it is in fact Tom's elderly grandfather. They get him dried off. They give him a lot of booze. He begins talking to his grandson. Meanwhile, Frank, the friend, slips out, leaving Tom and his grandfather alone to talk. Grandfather reveals that he is in fact dying. The doctors don't give him long, but rather than be a burden on his friends and family, he's decided to sort of make a last grand tour of the region. He's traveling from place to place, never staying more than a few days, trying not to be a burden, but also reconnecting with these family members who he's been estranged from. Later, he's overcome by some strange fit. He goes out into the night, gets wet again, screams and howls and hoots, and then comes back in, and he seems to be fine again. So clearly something's up, some sort of inner trauma. But when he comes back in, they begin drinking again, he and his grandson Tom. Grandfather begins to tell him a tale from his childhood. It seems that on the summer of his 12th birthday, he was walking on the beach and he met another little boy about his age. The boy was of gypsy descent, I guess. I think he calls him a tinker. The family caravan has stopped nearby, but they're only going to be there for about a week, and in that week, they have sort of the most wonderful week-long friendship of his lifetime, and he describes it as being almost drunk. And drunk they are now again, which I guess is the connection. But they reminisce through the night until late, and then Tom goes to bed and sleeps. And by the time he wakes up, or before he wakes up, Grandpa himself leaves, but he takes one last look at him in his bed before he says goodbye, and then on the way down the stairs and out the door, he sees Frank returning from his night away, and he warns Frank not to hurt his grandson, or I'll come back from the dead and kill you. But yeah, that's about it. It's an odd story for Bradbury. Almost from the get-go, I was having seeing sort of strange homoerotic vibes running through the whole thing. When we meet the two residents of the room, Frank and Tom, they're sort of lounging by the fireside, and one's on the couch and one sort of sitting on the floor, lounging backwards, and sort of has his head in his lap, which is a little bit odd, I would say. But I think that's not really it. I think as the story goes on, you learn that it's more of a generational thing. I think it doesn't quite translate as much today as it did back then. But I'm reminded about what I've read about Tolkien and his relationship with his close friends, but more so a relationship from his books. The relationship between Sam and Frodo, this sort of close platonic male relationship. Which is sort of said to echo sort of the ways of the time, but also sort of the camaraderie brought about by their experiences in World War I. Not Frodo and Sam, they weren't in World War I, but Tolkien was and his friends. But I think this is more about that, because this story, in fact, when he goes back to telling the tale about meeting the boy, the gypsy boy, was in fact in the very early part of the 1900s, around the time of the Great War, and so I think that's sort of really the connection here. But in 1976, I think Bradbury's looking back on that time when, Bradbury was supposed to be like 95, so I think he may have been around already. But no, I think it's about best friends, and really the message that Grandpa goes on to tell us that he says that each person lives many lives in their lifetime. Basically, you have these little segments where you're somebody else and you have some different experience, but then these friendships end and you move on, but you have other new memories. And it's really about his reminiscence about all these periods of his life. And he remarks that it's incredible that he has such strong memories of this one time in his youth, but yet he's already beginning to lose the ability to remember the face of his longtime wife who is now departed. So, yeah, I think that's really what the heart of his story is. It's not one of Bradbury's best executed, in my opinion, but there's still a little bit of message there. You know, it's a little bit muddled. It doesn't quite translate to 2023 as much as I had hoped, but I can still, at the same time, get it a little bit. I think because throughout my life, I'm going to be 41 here soon. I do have memories of these certain phases of my life when I had certain friends, and I thought, yeah, this is it. This is the friendships that are going to last forever. And then for what other reason, sometimes them, sometimes me, sometimes the circumstances, those friendships fall apart. And the trouble is, for me at least, is learning to, one, let go, but two, focus on the good part instead of the bad part. I sort of find myself oftentimes fixated on the loss of friendship. Sometimes completely my fault in retrospect, but not always. But you have to forget about the bad part, remember the good, and sort of, as Grandpa says, sort of get drunk on it and sort of revel in those memories. And because eventually you're going to be like him, you're going to be in his 80s, near death, and that's all you're going to have left. So there you are. That was The Better Part of Wisdom from 1976. Tune in again in a couple of days when we will look at Interval in Sunlight from 1954, which is story number 94 of 100. So we are almost done with the stories of Ray Bradbury. See you later.